Hopefully, the conversation so far has helped you to see that you were promised a long list of benefits of becoming faculty, and our institutions have done the bait and switch. But what I really want you to take away from this episode is that you might feel stuck, but you're not stuck. You're not trapped. You can take all your skills and experience and training and move it to a new context. You can move it out of this horrible context of academia. I was talking to somebody and she said, academia is a hot mess. I have to leave. And I thought that's just perfect. You can take your skills out of the hot mess of academia and you can use them in a context where you have control. And you can have all the things that academia promised you but never delivered.
Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I'm Paulina Cossette, and today I want to talk about something a lot of us carry around without even realizing it. It is the feeling of having been promised something and then watching that promise get broken. Or I should say, realizing that the promise was never fulfilled. So you did everything right. You got the degree. Maybe you did a postdoc or two. You applied for jobs. You moved maybe across the country or even around the world. Wherever the job market sent you, you went there. And throughout this process, you kept getting told by the people around you that academia would give you a certain kind of life, a flexible schedule, job security, a minimum level of financial comfort. Okay. None of us go in expecting to be wealthy, but we do expect to be able to pay our bills. You'd get real intellectual freedom. You would do work that actually helps people. So, where is it? That flexible schedule that you were promised is really you working 10 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. The security of tenure has gone out the window. Your salary hasn't kept pace with inflation. And now our intellectual freedom is being chipped away with a sledgehammer. If you're listening to this podcast, my guess is that you're already nodding along. And today I want to have a very honest conversation about what academia promised, what it has delivered, and here's the part you probably don't realize yet, how running your own business gives you every single thing that academia promised you but never provided. If you've been feeling let down by your career choice and you're wondering what else you could do with your hard-earned skills and expertise, then stay tuned because I promise you there is hope. Let me start by naming some of the promises that academia made to us, because I think we get so busy just trying to survive the reality of academic life that we forget the things that it's supposed to give to us and what we actually signed up for. First, academia promised us a flexible schedule. We thought we'd spend a handful of hours teaching each week, and we'd get a say most of the time in the days and times that we would teach our classes. But beyond that, we'd get to design our own work days, whether we write and think in the morning and meet with students in the afternoons, or whatever we wanted our days to look like. The key thing is that many of us crave the ability and the flexibility to be in charge of our own schedules. That's why we don't want a 9 to 5 job. We don't want to have to go to a manager or a supervisor to see if we can leave campus early to pick up our kids from school or to go to a doctor's appointment. We don't want that kind of oversight. That's why we go into academia, is for the flexible schedule. And I can't leave out one of the biggest supposed perks. We'd largely have the summers off. Yes, we would spend that time writing and thinking and reading, but we wouldn't have to teach or be on campus. We could travel the world, we could spend time with our loved ones, and we could live freely like the professionals and intellectuals we were trained to be. That was the promise, the flexible schedule. The second promise was job security. I can't even say it without laughing right now. Tenure was always the dream. It was the pot of gold at the end of the very long rainbow. And we agree when we take a tenure track job, if we can get one, we agree to sacrifice through our PhD programs, through those postdocs, through those initial tenure track years. We give everything up. We put off having children or living near our family because we think it means that we will finally reach the holy grail of job security of tenure. And we are so willing to give up these things because we are promised that tenure is a thing that we can eventually achieve, and along with the job security that comes with it. And this is what's supposed to make all these other struggles worth it. The third promise, another one I can't say without laughing, financial comfort. Growing up in a low income family, I remember when one of my undergrad professors told me that he made around 55,000 a year to teach as a poli sci professor at, it was an R1 school then. Yeah, a big university. And for me, as a 20-year-old who had been working part-time jobs since I was 12 and who only made it through college thanks to scholarships I worked my butt off for and resources like the Pell Grant, which I think is not even around anymore. That's, to me, making 55,000 a year, that sounded like winning the lottery. And I knew that as a professor, I wouldn't be wealthy by any stretch of the imagination, but being able to earn enough to live comfortably, to not be living paycheck to paycheck anymore, to not have to worry about how I was going to make rent or about whether or not I could afford to buy something for my kids. That felt like a really fantastic deal. And that financial security was something that really drew me to the idea of being a professor. Plus, you combine that with the security of tenure, and it's a huge win for somebody like me who was just so familiar with precarity. And so, when I was told that if I worked my butt off and did all these things and lived where I hated and worked with people I hated to finally get tenure, which was job security and a decent salary and benefits, to me, I was willing to sacrifice everything else to have that final outcome, to benefit from those promises that were being made to me for so many years. And I was willing to put in the work and the time to get all of it, as I'm sure many of you have also experienced. I should also note here that maybe some of us even thought that, we're getting a PhD. That's like a big deal. That's a decade or more of training and hard work and expertise. And we're some of the smartest and hardest working people in the world. And, we're talented. And so, like, maybe we'd earn a decent salary because of that. But it's just kind of a joke now. Anyway, the fourth promise that academia made to us was intellectual freedom. The ability to follow our curiosity, to pursue the questions that matter to us, to contribute to knowledge in ways that we find meaningful, and again, to not be beholden to a supervisor or a boss in a 9 to 5 job who tells us what we have to work on every day. We really love that idea of intellectual freedom. Finally, academia promised that we would do work that would help people. So many of us who get burned out in higher ed end up in that position because we just give too much. We are too committed to our students and our colleagues, and we don't let the ball drop, even though everybody else is dropping balls all over the place. And we put all of this energy and time and self sacrifice into our role because we care about our students and we care about our colleagues. And yet we don't get enough back to make all of that effort worth it. But that initial calling and that desire to help shape the next generation, that's why most of us went into this. It wasn't for the money. Again, we wanted security. We wanted a little bit of comfort. We knew we weren't going to be rich, but we really wanted to help people and to change lives. And, underneath all of this, there was also an implicit promise that a professorship inside a university is the only real destination for a PhD. This was not an outright promise of things that we would get if we sacrificed, but there was this implicit idea or this commitment or this story. Maybe that's the better way to say it, is there was this implicit story that we were also told for all these years that if you commit to this, if you get the PhD, that is the only job you can have is inside a university. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on your field. There's a lot of folks in science and other fields that do have more options, but I think it's, from what I've heard, it's fairly widely assumed that academia is like the premier place to be, if not the only place to be. And you can tell me if I'm wrong about that. But of course, I'm centered in the social sciences and humanities when I'm thinking about this. I remember when I entered my PhD program and I would share with people that I wasn't really that interested in teaching. I really loved doing the research and the writing. And I remember very vividly that statement that, well, I don't really want to teach. That was met with this kind of soft grumble or this soft statement of like, well, that's not really how things are done. Like, well, you can't really just do research in political science. And I remember hearing that and feeling so eager to comply, to fit in, to do what I was told. And I felt that desire so strongly to fit in that I just completely changed and I adapted. And I went from not wanting to teach and wanting to do research to feeling like, well, this is what I have to do if I'm going to be successful. I have to teach and I have to enjoy it. And so I did end up enjoying it. I do enjoy teaching some of it, not 19-year-olds, but but it was this box that I was forced into. And the real me gradually faded over the years. The reasons that I went into this program, that I wanted to pursue this research, it gradually faded and it was suppressed by all of these other ideas about what I should be doing and what I should be pursuing. And so that was it. That was the path that I set out on. And from that point on, I just molded myself into the type of teacher scholar that the academy said I should be. And again, I did this, and I think so many of us do it because they make these promises to us that what you truly want is the flexible schedule and the intellectual freedom and the salary and all this stuff. We want those things. They make us feel safe. We think that they're going to give us the life that we so desperately desire, and they promise us that we're going to get it and that all the sacrifice is going to be worth it. But let's talk about what really happens. And I know I don't have to tell you all this. I know that if you are listening to this podcast, you are well aware of what the situation is like, but we're going to go through it anyway. I want to be clear here, though. The way this all shakes out in academia is not a personal failure. It is not about you. If academia hasn't delivered on these promises for you, that is not a reflection of your intelligence. It is not a reflection of your work ethic or your worth as a scholar or an educator. Our careers and our lives ended up this way in academia because this is how the system was designed to operate. Even though they, the system, spent a decade or more promising us something entirely different, it was designed to deliver exactly what it has delivered. Some might call it a bait and switch. On the first point, the flexible schedule. When I was a professor, my laptop went with me on every vacation, every single one. There was no such thing as time off. Summers were for catching up on all the writing that I hadn't done during the semester. And the semester was for surviving the semester. It wasn't time for research and writing, it was time for just surviving. I would consistently block off Fridays on my calendar so that I could spend time writing. I remember doing this every semester. I'd block every Friday off. And every single Friday, that time would inevitably get filled with committee meetings or emergency department meetings or emergency student or advisee meetings or people knocking on my door, even though it was closed, because they just had to come cry about whatever was going on. Anything that I needed to do in that Friday time, particularly writing or trying to finish research, trying to move my research agenda and my publication schedule forward, it always got sucked up by other things. There was always a fire to put out, and there was no time left for me. Forget having time to like go get a massage or something during the week and take care of myself. I didn't even have time to write. Once I had my son, I was working 7 days a week. I was getting virtually no sleep, and it was just a complete disaster. This is what led to me leaving, was that final year after I had my son, and I realized that academia was actually going to kill me if I stayed. And there was no way to do it. Like, it would have killed me if I hadn't had a child, and having a child was just gonna it was gonna accelerate the process. And so the idea that academics have a flexible schedule is just a complete myth. And I believe, it's one of these stories that we're told to just convince us to stay, to convince us to take the job and to never ask for anything better. The second promise was job security. We all know the academic job market has been in crisis for years. I started my PhD program in 2007. And so mid program, we were dealing with the financial crisis, and we were worried that there wouldn't be any jobs available for us when we graduated. Tenure track positions have been disappearing for decades. They're being replaced by adjunct roles that offer none of the security that the job was supposed to come with. And as we know, sadly, people are forced into those positions that give no benefits and very low pay because there just are not any other options. There are more people coming out with PhDs than there are tenure track jobs. People are spending years in postdocs and visiting positions, hoping that a permanent job will finally materialize. But for most people, of course, it never does. And I don't have to tell any of you again that in 2026, things are really dire. From the federal funding cuts in grant money to the generational cliff that we've known about for at least 10 years, but administrators have some reason not figured out how to prepare for it. Many programs are being cut. Faculty are being fired or forced to retire, which makes tenure basically meaningless. And entire colleges, entire campuses are shutting down. This is not job security, obviously. So that promise is also out the window. Third, we have financial comfort. I released a podcast episode a couple weeks ago, and my guest and I talked about how faculty salaries have been frozen for years. And the response that I got on that podcast was huge. People commented on my post on Instagram. They shared their stories. They talked about how they make less now than they did when they started out in their job. And I've seen some posts since then from the AAUP. They have been posting about this problem. And I think they shared a graph recently that showed that many faculty salaries have not kept pace with inflation. People with PhDs are working second or third jobs. They're adjuncting at a hodgepodge of different schools. You know all this. This is not comfort. This is not financial security. This is not financial comfort. This is desperately trying to survive. And it's nothing like what we were promised. Fourth, intellectual freedom. So, the most obvious challenge here is what's happening in the US right now, where people are being arrested for exercising their Amendment rights, for protesting, for making posts on social media, for talking about things like this on a podcast. Oops. And professors are being put on lists or being fired for their ideas, for their research, for their activism. Grants have been widely cut, especially in the DEI space, anything to do with gender. You all know this. But even before all of this chaos, I really have to question the idea that we had intellectual freedom at all before. When I left academia in 2019, and that was when the shit was just starting to hit the fan, but before the worst of it came, the big concern was MOOCs, massive open online courses. You remember those? That was what we were worried about. I remember applying to my job in 2017 and interviewing and asking the people at the college, is this, are you guys going into moving courses online? And they said, no, 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 we're a liberal arts college. That'll never happen. Well, sure enough, 2 years later, when I was leaving, that's exactly what the administration was talking about doing. Now, I left, thankfully, but I've also sat here and watched the rest of you have to go through COVID and the rise of AI. And my worry over MOOCs feels so innocent and so naive and just laughable at this point. I remember being the only professor in my department who was strict about not allowing students to use cell phones in the class. I was adamant that they would be respectful and keep the phone away. Well, no other professor required it. And so I was suddenly the mean professor who, was making this ridiculous expectation of students. So, ultimately, I think we know that in higher ed, students are perceived as the customer, and the customer is always right. And if you're grading too hard, you're supposed to change your grades. And if the syllabus is too hard, you're supposed to change the syllabus. And if your university has 37 different policies that you have to put in your syllabus, you have to word them exactly the way that they do about plagiarism, about AI, about attendance, about whatever. And all of that has to go in your syllabus. And so anyway, my point is, where is the intellectual freedom in that? Where is the freedom to teach our classes the way that we want? It's not there. It's another broken promise. And when you're teaching 4 courses a semester, sitting on 17 committees, supervising 50 undergrads, navigating departmental politics, navigating a toxic work culture, who has the time or mental energy to focus on the intellectual work that drew you to this job in the first place? We have become a shell of our former selves. We have to teach to the administration mandates. We have to make sure that we please the customers, and we just have to try to survive each week. Finally, we were promised that we would be able to do rewarding work. Yes, there are some genuinely kind, hardworking, caring students who help us salvage the last shred of joy that we might have left in our jobs. We love mentoring them. We love giving feedback on their writing. We love watching the light bulb go off in their minds when they finally understand and whatever it is clicks that we've been trying to share with them. And it's so exciting and I loved it. But it is getting virtually impossible to enjoy any of these good experiences when we spend the rest of our time grading AI slop and trying to figure out how to keep students from cheating on any of their assignments or exams that we give them. So, those are all the promises again and how they've been broken. Now, I could sit here and complain about this all day long, but that is not what this episode is supposed to be about. Hopefully, the conversation so far has helped you to see that you were promised a long list of benefits of becoming faculty, and our institutions have done the bait and switch. But what I really want you to take away from this episode is that you might feel stuck, but you're not stuck. You're not trapped. You can take all your skills and experience and training and move it to a new context. You can move it out of this horrible context of academia. Somebody called it a hot mess the other day. I was talking to somebody and she said, academia is a hot mess. I have to leave. And I thought that's just perfect. You can take your skills out of the hot mess of academia and you can use them in a context where you have control. And you can have all the things that academia promised you but never delivered. I left my tenure track job, as I said, in 2019. And for a long time, I believed what I'd been taught to believe, that being a professor was the only real opportunity for someone with my training. There were no other options. At first, leaving felt like failure. I tried to avoid it for years. I was terrified to leave. It felt like giving up. It felt like I was abandoning my students and my colleagues. I felt guilty. And I also had no idea what else I would do. But what I have come to understand, and what I spend a lot of time helping other PhDs understand, is that that belief is a lie. That story that you can only be a professor if you have a PhD, that is a story that academia tells us to keep us trapped, to make sure that we keep accepting the low pay and the overwork and the toxic culture, and that we never demand better, that we never leave. Your PhD gave you skills that are genuinely valuable outside academia. You have the ability to read critically, to write clearly, to give rigorous but kind feedback, to guide someone through a complex project. These are not just academic skills. These are things that people will pay you for. And you don't have to start over. You don't have to train for a role that has nothing to do with what you already know and the things you've already been doing every day for years. You get to start this new phase of your career differently, but still using all the skills you already have. So let's go back to that list of promises that academia made to us, because here's the point that I have been building to. Entrepreneurship delivers on all of those promises. And I know that words like business and entrepreneur, those are scary. They have been dirty words in our circles for years. The thought of starting your own business or marketing or, being salesy, that might even make your skin crawl. It certainly did for me years ago. But I hope you'll hang in there with me for just a few minutes longer, because if you do, I'm confident that you will see that running an academic editing or coaching business is nothing like what you're thinking. It involves none of that gross, salesy, pushy stuff. The idea, the vision of business that we have in our minds is nothing like what the reality is really like. And it truly does deliver on those promises that you've been waiting for. So first, we have the promise of the flexible schedule. When you run your own business, you control your calendar. Nobody owns your time but you. You decide when you're going to work each day, when you're going to work throughout the year. You decide how many hours you're going to put in and when you close the laptop. I work about 25 hours a week. I pick up my kids from school every afternoon. That's when my workday ends, which is like halfway through a normal workday. I don't check email on weekends. I take the entire month of August off to spend with my kids. Last year, I took over 10 weeks of vacation and I did not do a stitch of work during any of it. The laptop stays at home on vacations now. That was not possible when I was a professor. So you really do have a flexible schedule when you are your own boss. Second, job security. This is probably one of the biggest fears that people have that they talk to me about. And it is that perceived risk of starting a business. Is starting a business a 100% guarantee of success? Of course not. Absolutely not. But neither was starting your PhD, and neither was getting your PhD. And as I said earlier, many people with PhDs are earning minimum wage at the grocery store at Home Depot because there aren't enough academic jobs available. And absolutely no shade to anyone in that situation. My point is just that getting the PhD isn't a guarantee of quote unquote success. So there was risk involved when you applied to that PhD program and when you stuck it out for 6 years, even if you didn't realize there was risk involved. And here's where the risk in business is different from the risk in academia. When you own your own business, you have complete control over the work that you're doing. If you test out an idea and it doesn't fly, you can pivot. You are in charge. In my program, I teach business and marketing like a science experiment. We don't know the results when we start out. We don't know that some idea for a coaching offer or a program or whatever is going to work. We have a hypothesis. We collect data. We reach a conclusion based on those data. And then we make changes where we need to. We change our messaging. We change the places where we're seeking out our clients. We change the types of clients that we're hoping to attract. All of it is flexible. You get to pivot wherever you want. Nothing is set in stone. Also, your business can't be defunded. Nobody can call you into the dean's office and tell you that your business is being eliminated. Nobody can decide not to renew your contract. When you build a client base and a reputation, that belongs to you and no one can take that away. It travels with you wherever you go. And, you know, the security of running your own business is different from tenure. It's not a piece of paper. Learning to successfully run your own business is a skill set and a network and a personal brand that you own. You own it forever. It is yours. And you get to make it whatever you want it to be. And you get to change it whenever you want to change it. And the startup costs are small. We're not opening a restaurant here. We're not opening a retail shop. Those startup costs are huge. But the investment that you make in starting and editing our coaching business, even if you enroll in my program, if it's just editing, all you need is a computer with Microsoft Word and an internet connection. If it's coaching, it's just Zoom. But if you enroll in my program, you can earn back that investment by editing just one dissertation. Or maybe you serve one or two coaching clients. That's it. The third promise was financial comfort. In my first year as a copy editor, I worked about 30 hours a week. I was an independent contractor for editing agencies. The pay was abysmal, but I still earned about $45,000 that year. And that was 2020, 2021, something like that. Plus I had a second child. In 2024, I had 55 private clients and I made over $100,000 working 30 hours a week. My earnings have only grown from there. And I would not be making what I do if I had stayed in academia. Earning six figures would have been unthinkable to me when I was a professor. And many people in my program, becoming an academic editor or coach, BAE, they are on their way to hitting those numbers too. One of my first students recently had her first $10,000 month as an editor and coach. She did it this spring, and her business has been continuing to grow from there. One of my one on one clients just started working with me late this spring. She secured $8,000 in coaching contracts from two clients in her first month after launching her business. And she has three more discovery calls already booked as of my recording this episode. $8,000 from two clients in coaching. Those are her very first two clients she's ever landed in her life. She landed them in the first few weeks of launching her business, $8,000 coming in. Another BAE member landed seven clients during her 12-week cohort, and her business has continued to grow. I could go on and on in this, but I won't, as much as I would love to. Is everyone in the program successful right out of the gate? No, of course not. Some people prefer to grow slowly. Some people are still teaching full time, or it just takes them a minute to adjust to serving clients and to marketing. Some people move more slowly. Some people have retired early from their faculty role and they just want to attract a few clients a month just to bring in a little extra money. Not everybody moves at the same pace. Not everybody has to be fully booked within 3 months of finishing the program, but there are people who get there. And so this gets back to point one on flexibility. You get to choose what your work schedule looks like. Fourth, intellectual freedom. When you have a business, you get to choose your niche and your clients and your projects. If you love developmental editing on book manuscripts, that can be your whole business. If you want to help graduate students, you can build a dissertation coaching practice. You are not assigned to teach any courses you hate. You are not forced to work with people who treat you badly. If you start out editing and you want to shift to coaching, and a lot of people do, you do it. You follow your own intellectual interests and you build a business around them. The final promise is work that helps people. This is the easiest one. In a business, the clients who come to you want to be there. They are paying you because they believe in your expertise and they need your help. They respect you. They treat you well. They are sincerely grateful for your support. And if any inquiry comes across your desk and it feels like it's from someone who isn't a good fit, we'll say, well, you tell them, oh, my calendar has suddenly filled. Sorry, I hope it works out for you. And you take a pass on that one. There was somebody who contacted me years ago who kept promising me that if I would lower my quoted rate to him, he would send me dozens of papers to edit. He would send his colleagues to me, all these promises. And he kept trying to whittle me down to lower my rate. It was ridiculous. And I finally said to him, I'm no longer able to work with you, whatever, I don't remember the exact wording, but I'm no longer able to work with you and I wish you well. And that was it. You don't have to put up with these people anymore. And I want to give one bonus benefit here because I know it's so important to many of you, and that is geographic freedom. One of the cruelest things about the academic job market is that it dictates where you have to live. We know this going in, and it's one of the things that we willingly sacrifice in order to get the scheduling flexibility and the job security and all that. You go where the job is, full stop. But many of us get into those jobs, the academic jobs, and our life at 35 or 40 is not the same as it was at 25 or 30. Maybe we start a family. Maybe our parents are getting older. And we realize that we don't want to be stuck in some place that we hate living. When you own your own business, you get to choose your zip code. You get to choose your country. You need an internet connection and a quiet space to work, and that's it. People in my program have built their businesses while moving states, while moving countries. And for many of them, starting their business is what has allowed them to move states to finally live with their spouse again. It has allowed them to flee the US and to live somewhere safe for their family. It has allowed them to move home to live near their parents and to finally be able to afford to buy a house. These are real stories. These are real people, real experiences. And this is, these desires to be able to do these things and to have this kind of life that people have always wanted. We get into this in our community calls. People share their struggles in academia. They share what they've been through. They share the dreams that they have put aside for years. And they share their wins. They share what starting a business has allowed them to achieve. Now, I want to give you two quick pictures of what this can look like in practice, this transferring your academic skills from traditional higher ed to a business, because I know that the abstract version can be a bit difficult to imagine for yourself. So I'm going to give you two different examples. The first one, picture somebody who spent 10 years as humanities faculty. Most of that time was spent giving detailed feedback on undergraduate papers. It was spent peer reviewing manuscripts that were being submitted to journals. That's unpaid work, by the way, as you all know. It was spent editing their own or co-authored work before submission. And this person never thought of herself as an editor. She thought of herself as a scholar who happened to be good at giving feedback. When she left academia, she set up a developmental editing practice and she specialized in academic book manuscripts. She works with scholars who are turning their dissertations into books or preparing their monograph for submission. She didn't get an editing certificate. She didn't get any special training. She is doing exactly what she was doing before as a professor, reading things closely, asking important questions, giving rigorous structural feedback. Except now she works from home, she sets her own schedule, and she charges $75 to $100 an hour. The skills were always there. She just needed to organize them as a business. Now, our second example, picture somebody with a PhD in education who spent years mentoring graduate students through the dissertation process, watching them get stuck on writing, on structure, on the psychological weight of finishing such a long and important project. And this person starts offering writing and publishing coaching. He works one-on-one with academics who are struggling to make progress on their books or articles. Not the editing work. He doesn't do editing, but he's coaching the person. He's an accountability partner. He helps them build a writing practice. He helps them break through those writing blocks. He helps them actually finish manuscripts and get them submitted. His background in education means that he knows how people learn and where they get stuck. He has a framework for helping them work through these challenges. And his time in academia means that he understands the specific pressures and fears that his clients are working through. That is not something that you can be trained in. That is not something that you can manufacture. That is an expertise. That is a skill. That is an empathy. Is that I don't know. That is a form of empathy that came directly from this person's PhD experience and training. Neither of these people has a special business gene. They are just academics, quote unquote, just academics who looked at what they already knew how to do and decided they were going to offer those skills as services to the world in a different way. The hardest part of this transition isn't acquiring the skills to do the job. You have the skills. The hardest part is making that identity shift of conceptualizing how you can practice those skills in a different context, how you can be confident enough to allow people to pay you the market rate for those skills, for those things that you're doing to help them. Academia spent years, maybe decades, telling you that there is one path for someone like you, and that is to become a professor inside a university. They told you that's the only option. Anything else is a detour or a consolation prize or a sign that things just didn't work out, that you weren't good enough. That is a story that we have been told so many times that most of us have completely internalized it. But I am here to tell you that leaving isn't failure. Leaving is choosing yourself. It is deciding that the promises that academia made to you, those promises matter. And you deserve to have the life that you have always wanted, even if you have to build the structure that delivers it yourself. When I talk to people in my community, what I hear over and over is not regret about leaving. No way. It is regret about waiting so long to leave, about agonizing over the guilt and the fear and the worry that you're not capable of doing anything else. That is where people feel regret, is that I stayed so long. And I felt it too. But all those feelings fade. What doesn't fade is the relief. If any of this is hitting home with you, if you are thinking, okay, but how do I actually do this? I want you to know that there is a community of people doing exactly what I described. And they all have a roadmap that they got inside my program, Becoming an Academic Editor or Coach, BAE. We have run 9 cohorts now. Each cohort is 12 weeks. We have over 120 members from all over the world. These are people who were exactly where you are, who had exactly the same doubts, and who built real businesses out of the skills that they already had. The link to find out more is in the show notes. And if you're curious about working together more closely one-on-one instead of inside of a group program, just get in touch. You can email me directly at paulina@acadiaediting.com. And I promise you, my friend, you are not broken. The system has failed you, but there is a better way to live, and you can have that. Thanks for listening.
If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.